Jordan.
Hello, Craig.
I like to always tell people that you're the Steve Martin of conversations, because I think you and I have done this about 10 times.
That's right, yeah, I think so.
And we always have interesting things to talk about, just because you're a veteran of the industry, you're a founder that built arguably one of the most successful technologies in our space with Try and Pay. And then recently, in the last couple of years, you've actually started what has become one of the most successful venture-backed startups. And startups, period, but has a venture. Tell us a little bit about sort of what's the update with Highway.
Yeah, thanks for the nice words, man. You built a lot of great stuff in FreightWaves and Sonar. So you've been a mentor of mine for a long time. Highway, it's been a wild ride the last couple of years. We sought out to create a more secure environment for brokers and carriers to transact, and been able to do that for now going on 600 customers. And the success of keeping this fraud out of our brokers network has, really helped them focus on their core business and, focus their time, effort, development dollars on making their business more differentiated and serving their customers, and not worrying about the problems associated with stolen freight, phishing attempts, and all those things. So it's been a tremendous ride. We've been blessed to have a lot of trust from the industry that we've known for a long time, and been able to deliver them some great results. 600
clients, what, 2 years?
Yeah, 2.5 years, yeah.
It's pretty, that's amazing. How have you accomplished that? That's almost unheard of.
I think, we were, when I left Try and Pay, this was what I sought out to do. I saw there was a gap in how brokers did KYC for their carriers. There really wasn't a KYC process. If you walk into a bank and try and borrow $250,000, that bank's going to know everything about you, because banking's been around a long time and is used to people trying to steal their money. And in freight brokerage is such a new industry. It's only 30, 40 years old relative, that's relatively young. And this just is an area that hadn't developed, and a muscle that hadn't been built out. And the timing worked out where, we were able to get to market ahead of a lot of the fraud that was coming, and get protection in place for our customers. So I think, there was a timing element. The second element is, our team comes from the industry. It's a lot of brokers and people, we have a lot of relationships, strong relationships. And that trust is so important when you're selling a compliance product, that people trust that, you're going to do what you say you're going to do, that you're going to be around, that you're not running just, a loss-losing business, running, round to round, VC round to VC round. And so, there was a lot of trust already innately in the industry, I think, for myself and Michael Caney and Bill Nordis and Will Van de Kamp and a lot of those guys who've been around a while.
Yeah, you got a strong sales team. A lot of really good seasoned sales people.
I'm sorry, but I hired a couple of his sales guys, so he's a little frustrated with me. You said I could. I asked for permission.
We'll talk about that later. Kevin Martin would like to.
I paid for more sponsorship. I upped my sponsorship levels.
We're very proud. It's interesting, as a founder, I have a lot of pride seeing people that have worked at FreightWaves go on to do other things in the industry. And that's as you sort of scale a business and you become more of a veteran founder, or as you start to learn, you're mature, you realize people leaving, going on to pursue better careers is actually a really interesting opportunity, because now you can continue to develop that. I have a lot of respect for Nick Saban. I'm not an Alabama fan. But I always think about the coaching tree of what Nick Saban or Mike Leach, as a Big 12 reference, rest in peace, of just creating all of these sort of coaches that have gone out and had profound careers. And I think that's the definition of success, is being able to see people. So I actually just giving you a hard time. We're friends, we can do that. Highway is solving a really important problem. Load board fraud is a major issue. It's only getting worse. It's going to get far worse with AI, because now all this technology that has sort of proliferated, social media, is going to be, if not already, in the hands of these really bad, nefarious actors. And you mentioned something that's pretty profound, is, dude, getting a $10,000 wire at a JP Morgan takes an act of Congress, it feels like.
That's right.
You're talking about taking a load that's $250,000 or $100,000, whatever the goods cost, and basically, in a matter of minutes, transacting this with oftentimes zero knowledge and, frankly, history with that third party. If we don't solve this as an industry, the freight brokerage industry is at a substantial risk. How are you guys thinking about AI and all these tools that will enable nefarious actors?
Yeah, oh man, yes, that's a big question. I'll start with the AI piece. So I'm a nerd, I'm a developer. We don't use any AI. We just use really good SQL queries and good database design. So we don't try and hook onto any the buzzword around that. But yeah, to then keep answering the question of what you're talking about, what's changed is there, people used to be able to hire a carrier based on 3 emails and, passing a rules assessment and insurance cert, and that's just not possible anymore. The world's just changed. I mean, we see fraud at almost every layer, whether it's the insurance, whether it's the ELD layer, whether it's at email phishing. I mean, there's they're trying to get in almost every point of access of a freight broker, and so you have to have a multi-layered solution that's looking at not just does this carrier pass my overall company rules assessment, but what type of freight am I willing to give that carrier? So that's the evolution that I think is the most fundamentally changing of highway is. Yeah, the carrier may pass this, before it was just like, hey, do they pass this rules assessment? Now we're saying, okay, they may pass, but they don't get access to consumer electronic loads out of Southern California, or they don't get access to, high-value loads for this shipper, right? You can change we allow brokers to do low-level compliance and change the requirements. And that's so important in this industry, in this market right now, because you have to reduce friction. You can't put friction on the entire business. You have to let certain things move really quickly, like your bottled water loads or your low risk, low value loads. Like those need to be able to move quickly and not put a lot of friction on your carrier sales team to get those loads covered. But the high value stuff is the one where you want to focus your effort and energy. In any compliance or risk function, you want to put stuff in a matrix and focus on the ones that have the highest risk so that you don't overly burden the entirety of the business. How that relates to freight brokers and their ability to serve shippers is, we think we make our brokers better, and that's our job. We don't serve shippers. We don't sell to shippers. We never will. We serve one master. And it's really important that we make our brokers better and make them the hero. And we see that. We see, examples of even the United States Postal Service saying to brokers that they want them to use highway if they want to stay in the USPS network. And it's stuff like that that's really helping our customers win more business. And that's important for us because they need to be the hero for us to succeed. And yeah, I think this isn't going away. They're here now. And once they're here, they don't go away. They just continue to change and evolve, the fraudulent actors.
When you set out to start this business a couple years ago, what was the one sort of foundational idea that said, this is not being solved? I mean, there are other players in the market that have been, RMIS, and that's part of TruckStop, has been doing this for years. But there was something that you saw that was a massive gap that enabled you. And frankly, 600 customers is a testament to the fact that there is a demand for it. What was the sort of central idea that you wanted to go out and solve for?
In the financial services world, when we lend money, we want to look at your overall presence, your overall claims, your overall attachments. And that allows us to underwrite the risk in totality. We don't just look at one element of a business when we lend money. I still say we. I mean, the scars are still there. I'm still kind of a banker at heart. Yeah. And that just wasn't what we were doing in freight brokerage. We weren't looking at an entirety or the totality of this entity. We were looking at an MC number and checking, carrier authority and maybe checking for some inspections on a map, and it just wasn't enough to create what we like to call a digital footprint. And so I think what's fundamentally different about how we approach a carrier profile, like a fleet profile, is we don't think about all MCs aren't created equal. And there's tens of thousands of fraudulent MCs out there. Like there are tens of thousands. It's not, there's 375,000 carriers, 375,000 entities that have interstate motor carrier authority as of this morning. There's not 375,000 interstate trucking companies. There just isn't. I've seen the payment data, I've seen the compliance data, and so when you take an MC, it's not that like we treat that's not by default a carrier in our minds. Like we need to see all the other pieces brought in to be able to fulfill that profile and say, okay, we treat this as an actual carrier that has trucks, that has insurance, and the trucks are insured and they're actually running. And where are they running? Where do they have access to freight? Because showing an MC number, all the loads that you have available is not a good use of resources. You're exposing yourself to a lot of risk.
What is your estimate in terms of, out of that 375, how many of those are?
I think there's 150,000 active interstate trucking companies in the U.S.
So you think we have 225,000 of those? It's
complex. There's a lot of that number that are owner-operators running under someone else's authority that keep their old authority. There's a lot of people that have their interstate carrier authority but aren't using, like large companies like Cisco and things like that. But actually, carriers that are running for brokers in interstate loads is about 150, maybe 175,000 in a peak market.
Do you think we'll ever see the FMCSA really crack down on a lot of the nefarious actors, or they've taken a sort of a hands-off approach? And
it's not their. It's also not. It's also partially not their mandate, right? It's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Their mandate is around safety and of the roads and making sure accidents don't happen. And so, is it their responsibility to make sure that this person qualifies for a $250,000 consumer electronics load? Like, no, that's not their responsibility. So there's an element that, yeah, we'd love to see the FMCSA do more around protecting contact information changes of motor carriers, and they're working on it, and it's hard. I mean, they're big, they're massive. They're bigger company than basically than everyone in here, right? The DOT is huge, and so they're working on it, and I'd like to see them do more there. But like asking them to make hiring decisions, it's also not in their mandate. They do a ton of work beyond just this motor carrier registration. I mean, they do lots of studies and work with safety data that is far outside this. I think that's more their mandate than making sure that you put a right carrier on a consumer electronics load.
Yeah, nothing at the DOT happens quickly. I mean, it is something as sort of a student of freight, but also a student of the FAA, which is a notoriously bureaucratic process. They had a congressional mandate tied to appropriations that is 7 years late in terms of rules, and it's tied to money.
7 years late and right on time.
7 years late of rules that were mandated by Congress, and we're still waiting on the final rule to be passed. But anyways, I digress. So really, this is something that the industry itself must do. Like, if we're actually going to solve this issue, waiting for the government is not happening. One of the things that I think is really interesting is a lot of these crimes in themselves are relatively small transactions. We're talking, if you think about the type of fraud where we're talking not theft, that's an entirely different issue, which is really a newer issue, I think, in the world of fraud or theft. The types of fraud are $1,000, $2,000 type transactions. Individually, that's not a big crime. And so the authorities just don't care. A lot of this stuff is offshore anyways. It strikes me that the industry has to do something. You guys are building technology. Do you think that the load boards, DAT and truck stock specifically, have responsibility here as well?
I'm not gonna speak directly into that. That's probably more for the DAT and truck stop to answer and their customers to answer for them, because we don't have a relationship with them, so it wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak into that. But I would say, like, we all have a part. We all have a part in it, and they can. I think we all agree we're all in this together. It doesn't benefit anyone for fraud to happen in our industry, and we have partnerships with insurance companies and ELD providers and lots of different folks that we work together to try to make this more secure for everyone, because it doesn't benefit anyone when this happens. But it's caught everyone a little flat-footed. I mean, it caught our industry a little flat-footed, how fast they got here and how fast they spread. And what's fascinating is the tactics that we see them doing in our industry, they've been doing in other industries for a long time. So this isn't like these were people that were in freight that decided to start doing this. These are people who are outside of it that came in and found and used the vectors that they'd used in other industries. And so I didn't answer your question.
No, that's fine. I like putting people on the spot.
I know you do.
The poor gentleman from UPS yesterday had to. I tried to get on the
text from Brent Hutto and Satish if I walk off the phone here.
Well, I was trying to get the executive from UPS to go a little into Chinese politics, and he was not having it.
Yeah.
So I'll let you off the hook on that one question. One of the beliefs I have, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that a lot of this sort of acceleration of this fraud happened in a post-COVID environment where a lot of the brokers, in an effort to really scale up their operations, used a lot of offshore talent to really build up these operations in places like Central Europe, Russia, Ukraine, et cetera. And a lot of that fraud has been propagated from offshore actors. Is that a fair statement, or do you think this is more fundamental to something that's actually much broader?
There is a deep domain knowledge. So the fraud is originating overseas. A lot of the activities originate overseas, absolutely. And it is confusing because we see it coming from areas that do have large offshore and outsourcing service providers or office centers there that are working in freight. There is some domain leakage happening, right? There is absolutely some knowledge of that, and it's not those service providers that are at fault. That just that data, that information about how our industry works is leaking out and getting into the people that want to commit fraud are figuring out how it works and doing that. I mean, just specifically like the vectors they use that we see out of Pakistan, right? They know how carriers work. They know how dispatcher services work. They know how dispatcher services talk to brokers. They have all that verbiage and language down, and they know how to communicate, and they know how to obfuscate their identity and make it look like they're not in Pakistan and make it look like they're Joe in Georgia. And that training happened over time. They learned that, leaked out over time, how our industry works. Like they didn't come in as bad actors. They came in a different way and learned the industry for sure.
ChatGPT talking about AI layers, has made it so easy. My son has a little website he uses, and he uses that for marketing copy. And frankly, it looks as good as anything. And I know that you can see articles that are written not on FreightWaves, but others. We don't use AI. One thing to use Grammarly to correct grammar, it's entirely different to have an article that is written by a ChatGPT, which can't write trucking content, by the way. I was using Grammarly the other day, and it corrected trucks to lorries, and that just no sense.
It's not gonna work.
My grammar's not great, that's why I gotta use AI. But it's one of the things that you sort of think about the old Nigerian Brent, I've chosen you because I've inherited money and I need to offshore this stuff. That stuff's kind of obvious. The problem is the ChatGPT, the Geminis of the world have made it so easy to sound credible with just a little bit of domain expertise that we are fighting a completely different problem now, where if you mentioned having industry expertise combined with no longer the typical, email that is spelled incorrectly in grammar, you can write a really high qualified email. How are you guys sort of dealing with that proliferation? Yeah, I mean, we look at the email content on a lot of these fraudulent attempts because through our Outlook plugin, like people report fraud, and then when they report fraud, they'll send us the content and say like, hey, look at this, and the content's gotten the email grammar's gotten really, really good. Like they're clearly using tools to make it appear as if they're writing as a native speaker. So yeah, I mean, this is what makes all this harder. You gotta use a multi-layered approach, and you gotta be checking things like, hey, is this person really truly a representative of this motor carrier? Because the way that they're able to write these now without a whole lot of effort, and they also, it's also not written in a way that's like overly formal. Like it has a tone to it that's like you would be writing, like you and I would write an email. Like it's become so good that it's difficult to just use your spidey sense on the carrier sales floor, and they're moving so fast. So it's a problem, and they're going to keep getting better. We think we had our first audio call in on a chat, someone using some AI layer to call in to pretend to be somebody.
we've listened to the recording a couple times. It's so hard to tell. Like, it's hard to tell, like, was that an AI recording, or was that AI voice generated, or was that someone? Because, you know, on the call-ins, that's another way you can tell, like, if someone's trying to commit fraud or do things. But they're using these tools. It's kind of sad that that's one of the use cases of AI, but it is what it is. So that's why it's so important to have a multi-layered approach and not be reliant just upon the spidey sense of an individual to detect an email pattern or a voice pattern that they think is off.
I had a phone call from a truck driver, owner-operator. This is probably 3 weeks ago. And she had said, hey, I'm calling about a load. And it was FreightWaves. She's like, I'm calling about this FreightWaves load. And I called her back because I was quite curious. And I said, let's be clear, we're not in the freight market. And I was like, how did you instinctively reach out? How did you get a hold of me? And she's like, I Googled because I had gotten screwed the week before on a load, and now I actually call to verify, and I outbound call. And I was like, good for you. But to be clear, we're not.
We don't have a load for you.
It was interesting because to someone, you know, a day-to-day truck driver may not, they may see FreightWaves and think, oh, I'm familiar with the brand and stuff. It's just interesting how all this stuff is happening where it is quite scary. One of the things that's been happening in a lot of the AI circles is, you know, phone calls, the robocallers getting people to say prompts on a phone call, like hello, and they'll ask questions.
Yeah.
And it's nothing more than, you think you're talking to a human, but they're actually recording your voice. Frankly, at some point, someone's gonna take this podcast and become Jordan Graft from Highway calling about fraud. It's gonna happen to me because I'm very public. It is a scary, scary world. So let's talk about what you guys are doing to solve this problem. What are the top things that, in terms of that you can do to prevent fraud, or you're helping your customers do to prevent fraud?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's a multi-layer approach. It starts with the inbox. So, you know, with making sure that you know, using tools like our Outlook plugin to prevent fraud from even getting in your inbox, because they're phishing all the time. And if we can help you identify phishing attempts in your inbox, it just cuts it off right there. And the sooner you can cut it off, the better. And whenever our customers report fraud from the inbox, it gives us data that we can proactively identify fraud patterns before they hit. So we're knowing that, hey, these criminals are trying to attack certain types of freight in certain types of markets. And that allows us to use that data on the back end to improve our load lock product to make sure that we say, hey, if you got a load coming out of these high-risk areas or this high-risk commodity, you need to be aware that they're attacking this vector right now. And we're doing that before freight ever gets stolen. So that's powerful how that layer works together. You know, there's the new, once they figured out that they weren't able to just like fill out a form online to get into someone's network, they really started to attack the FMCSA contact information database. And we've seen thousands of reports by carriers that their contact information has been changed in the FMCSA. And still to this day, it's very simple to change any motor carrier's contact information in the FMCSA.
So if I wanted to,
you could.
I could go into Knight Swift and change it from, whoever the CEO is that.
You can submit an MCS 150 form, it gets processed. Yeah, and they're working to improve it, but like you said, they move slow and they weren't ready for this.
Even for the largest carriers.
There may be some additional layers they check there, but though for the small carriers for sure that aren't paying attention, that don't get the email that says, hey, your information is about to be changed, and don't respond to it, then yeah, I can go through.
Yeah, that's pretty scary. I mean, it's
the bigger carriers are more on it. They're more monitoring. They're monitoring it, and the FMCSA does send an email saying something's changed. But if you don't respond, then it just goes through.
Wow, that's pretty scary. Like, I mean, it's a whole new world order. What is the stuff that you're seeing emerge that maybe isn't typically on people's radar? Yeah,
we try to be mindful about talking about vectors that we're seeing before they become too public, because we don't want them to know that we know about them yet. But some of the things that came out of the last 120 days, 90 days, is they've found a way they're working to get a hold of the pickup number. That's really all they want. And so their ability to get the pickup number, whether they're in your network or they have a rate confirmation or anything, if they have the pickup number, they have everything they need. And so we see a lot of social engineering attempts to get carrier sales reps in a hot moment to give out a pickup number. And they're very good, because every carrier sales rep, or most carrier sales reps, have gotten a call from a driver at the gate who the pickup number's wrong, and they're pissed off because they're there on time and they want to get in, and they give out the pickup number over the phone. And that is an incredibly high-risk situation right now if you give a pickup number over the phone, because whoever has that pickup number is free to go in.
So you're saying absolutely under no terms you would recommend to a broker to give a pickup number over the phone?
Never over the phone.
How should they give a pickup number?
Over the confirmed email, the verified email of that carrier.
So going back
or text message, you could text it to the verified phone.
Going back to the original email that was interacting on that load confirmation.
Yeah.
And ensuring that that communication stays in a secure environment. So we're going to deal, the most frustrating thing about dealing with banks is the damn security emails. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
It is the most obnoxious thing because I can't just get it. And it's one thing to send financial information or personal information. It's like when you get a response that says thanks and it's a secure email, you're like, dude, I just spent 5 minutes logging in to say thank you. I didn't need that. So anyway, so this is what we're getting to, is at a point where the brokerage transactions are really headed into a scenario where we are creating some friction in the process to protect our own interests.
Yeah, there's in every product design, in every industry, across all of technology products, there's a balance between ease of use and security. And anytime you try to make something more secure, you're going to reduce ease of use, versus when you try to make something easier to use, you give up on security. And the balance is as a good product developer, product designer, is like, how do I find the right mix of reducing friction for the ones that, making it easy to use but not making it insecure. So yeah, there are things that we do today. Just think about in any aspect of your life. There are things you did 10 years ago that you don't do today. That's true of freight brokers. There's things we did 10 years ago in freight brokers that you're not going to be able to do today anymore, because there's not that same level of trust that we can do over what is a digital channel, either phone or email. Those are digital channels.
I mean, multi-factor was something that 2 years ago you didn't have to do to log into almost any software products in the space.
That's right.
And now that is we've seen, if you don't have multi-factor, that you're exposing yourself to an enormous amount of risk.
Yeah, and I think SSO is, single sign-on, is a much more powerful tool for authentication than MFA. I mean, no one likes doing the MFA on every site they want to get in, and SSO, I think, is so important. That's part of what we think signing with Highway is so powerful. Again, it's like it makes it easier for the carrier to get where they want to go while doing it secure by leveraging a one-time MFA use to allow the carrier to move into the different broker portals. So, but yeah, username and password, those have been compromised. You should just assume every username and password's out there. It's public information.
Jordan, are you going to banking, cybersecurity conferences to learn best practices? Because those are the guys that spend all the money to learn all this stuff, right? The banks and the financial institutions are the ones spending billions of dollars on understanding these practices. You've got to apply it to freight, but they seem to be the ones that are really investing in a lot of this research to sort of understand how to deal with scams. And then they should be. I mean, That's money. I care about my money being protected. Is that how you guys are thinking about it in terms of? Yeah,
I don't want to tell them by it. But yeah, I spent a lot of time with fintech guys and in that world. I came from that world, so I know a lot of guys over there. But yeah, they definitely see things faster than even we do, and I'm telling you, the vectors that they see will show up over here,
and really quickly, I imagine. The biggest risk that I think has really expedited. In the old days, a load theft was like a hijacking or an opportunity or some inside job where people are falling trails. But one of the risks that you've identified and you've talked about a few times is the fact that it's the double broker issue has gone from just small petty crimes, if you will, right, a couple $100, load advance, things like that, fuel advances, to actually stealing cargo, where we're seeing actual physical cargo stolen by faked MC numbers. What is going on there?
If you just ask my blunt opinion, they figured out that there wasn't enough, I don't want to say no one cared, but there wasn't enough resolve from law enforcement across all levels to make it stop. Once they found out they could steal a $50,000 load, a $100,000 load, and no one came after them. No one showed up at their house at night to arrest them. Once they realized that, and once they figured out what locales they could do it in, that they would not get prosecuted and arrested, then all bets are off. And we see that. They target markets where they know that, I mean, I have a in my inbox, I have the email example of the law enforcement of this certain jurisdiction saying they see the truck, they know it's stolen, they claim it's a civil matter, and they're not going to go arrest them. Like they interacted with the criminals that had stolen the load, and they wouldn't arrest them. I mean, that is empowering for a criminal to think that like law enforcement will interact with me face to face and won't do anything. And it's not every law enforcement. There's a lot of law enforcement doing a lot of great work across the industry, so I don't want to cast a broad brush, but they know of the opportunities they have in certain markets where they won't be prosecuted.
I mean,
San Bernardino, California is one of those.
30 years. I mean, I remember we would have at US Express, we could identify where the trailer was at a warehouse in certain parts of Los Angeles, and the police were like, we're not going to go in there. I had video of a kid who stole, this is plasma screen monitors when they were $20,000 on an air freight dock in Dallas. Video, gave it to the Grapevine Police Department. They went and asked the kid, we had him video stealing, he worked for us, stealing plasma screen monitors. And they asked him, did you steal them? And he said no, and that was the end of it. And you're like, it's on video. So I think the police just don't care about
I wouldn't say don't care. I want to make sure we're clear. Like, there's a lot of law enforcement doing a lot of great work, and we work with them, and they work with us, and we get data from them, and we help, and they're helping, and they're doing good work, and there are a lot of guys that care. There's just certain segments of the market, certain jurisdictions where they don't, and that is where it is a crime of opportunity, and they know that, and they work on those jurisdictions, and you know, Texas. Hey, come on, man. Hey, Texas.
You guys are fully armed
we're good. We're good, Texas. That's right.
It is. I mean, you can see these videos of people going into like retail shops in San Francisco and busting up a whole lane of stealing. The Apple one is my favorite because those phones don't work after the store.
That's right, I know.
And just like ripping them out. It's crazy. It's a scary conversation when you think about what it is, but you guys are bringing some level of confidence to customers, and you're also bringing some level of security. In terms of how companies should interact with you, what is the process to onboard them and bring them up?
Yeah, I mean, for a customer, it depends on the size of their network and the complexity of their process. You know, large brokers have very large complex processes and multi-systems feeding in, so that takes a little bit longer. But we're integrated with all the major TMSs, and so it's a pretty plug-and-play deal. And so for brokers, it's a product they can buy, but for shippers, we tell them, hey, the best thing you can do is just work with brokers that use Highway and encourage them to, protect their network that way. And it's free to the shipper; they don't have to pay anything. But we're happy to share with them the brokers that use Highways, and they recommend them use those to make sure their freight doesn't get stolen. And there's several dozen shippers that do that. So it's a good opportunity for both our customers and the shipper community to protect their networks.
Product-led growth, love it.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Jordan, appreciate you. We're out of time. Appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you.
And best of luck in the business.
Thanks, Craig.